Okay, so I'm just going to pretend you're brand new, all right? So welcome to Ecclesia. That's how you say it, all right? I know for a lot of you, that was the first big moment is I don't even know how to say the name of that church, okay? I didn't name the church, so I'd just like to say that as well. When actually, when the pastor that started the church, Wes, he called me up and my wife and I, and he was like, hey, I want you, we were thinking about coming and being a part of this. And my wife's like, how do you say that? And it was funny because we both said different things in response, like in how we said it. And surprise, surprise, for those of you that are like, what does that mean? It's church, okay? Very, very mind-blowing, okay? So I'm going to pretend you're new. All right, we've been walking through the book of Nehemiah, an incredible book in the Old Testament, and it's about this cupbearer to the king of Persia. Okay, the cupbearer was an individual who had incredible privilege, right? It was a good job to be able to get. You had the trust of the king. You were privileged to conversations with the king that other people weren't privileged to. You had the best food, the best drinks, all of that. And so we see Nehemiah's in this position, but he's a Jew. This isn't his home, right? Persia's not where he really belongs. He knows where he ultimately belongs. It's in Jerusalem. But 140 years earlier, Jerusalem had just been destroyed, just toppled by Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. And so ever since then, people have been exiled out of Jerusalem. Some have been allowed to return, but there's people scattered all throughout the known world, and he's one of them. And he's in Persia, and a report comes back as to the condition of the city of Jerusalem. And he hears that. And this is his people. This is God's people, right? The Jews, they've been set aside by God to glorify him, to be an example, to be a light to all the different people groups at the time. And so when we talk about rebuilding this wall, it's much bigger than a wall. It's about the glory of God being displayed. Okay, and so Nehemiah hears the state of the walls at Jerusalem, and it just breaks his heart. He literally breaks down, just weeping at the news that the walls are in shambles and the city is in disarray. And so based upon that news, we see him go into this time period of just praying and fasting and just weeping before God and just asking, what will you have of me? And we see throughout this time in his 4 months that as he continues to go to the Lord, he starts putting together this plan birthed out of a vision that God gave him, a burden that God gave him, that you're going to be the one to go back there and you're going to lead this. And we see that he asked the king for permission to go. And we see the king give him incredible favor. And not only that, pay for everything, give him the letters he needs to go through the different areas and the different regions in order to be safe. And we see that as Nehemiah comes into Jerusalem for the first time and he sees it and he's approaching it, it's got to be this emotional moment, right? It's like the vision that he's had, the burden he's had, and there it is. And he goes in and then he inspects the walls. He gets an idea of what's at stake and he inspires the people. And he says, let's go. Let's do this. And so we looked in chapter 2 as Nehemiah has just challenged them to this task, to this vision, and they agree to do it. And before we kick off chapter 3, what's so important for us to see is when God asks us to step out in faith for a vision, for a burden that he places on our hearts and our lives, it's much bigger than just you. Okay? It's never just about you. Right? So when he places a vision, a burden like that on your life, it's also for people around you, because one of the things that God does is he allows other people to hear, to listen, to see the vision you have, and through that, he actually inspires them to one of either two things. Either they join in to the vision that you have, or through God's work in your life, they're inspired to pursue the vision God has for them. And so he uses that. Now, why are we inspired to do that? Because you guys, if you're a Jesus follower, you are always looking to be a part of the things that God's working in, aren't you? right? Like our radar's up. Like we're like, where is God working? And when God's working in something, we're like, it is clear, it is evident that there's something special happening there, and I want to be a part of it. And not only do I want to be a part of it, but what? I'm willing to sacrifice to be a part of it. Okay, and what we see is these people, they actually sacrifice, take great risk to become a part of the vision, to help build these walls. A lot of them, they lived outside of the city walls, and so they're abandoning their families for some of them for this season. They're putting the rest of their jobs on hold, and so huge sacrifice for the people to say, we want to do this. But what we also see is part of what made Nehemiah's message so powerful was the sacrifice he had first modeled to them. See, remember, he had a great job, fantastic job. Okay, everything was like cush in his life. And he literally decides to give all of that up, to take an enormous risk, to travel hundreds of miles, to go and lead this project when at the time, he doesn't even know if they're gonna respond to him, right? Like he gets there and he could say, this is what God has called me to do. I'm here. Who's with me? And it could have been just like chirps, right? Nothing. And so there was huge sacrifice on his part. And so they were inspired by that. And so we see them take up this cause with him and they start to rebuild the walls. And we know that not everybody was in favor of this, right? Some of the local governors, Sanballat, one of them, in Samaria, he was one that was already mocking them and against the work that God wanted to do there. So we get to Nehemiah chapter 3. Now, if you've read Nehemiah chapter 3, you go, Steve, what in the world are you going to do with Nehemiah chapter 3? I mean, it's a bunch of names and names of gates. Like, what kind of sermon are you going to concoct from that, right? Well, I'm not. There you go. What I want to give you is a overview of chapter 3, and then we're going to really dive into chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 3, here's what happens. The people get to work, and chapter 3 is all about the response to the vision that Nehemiah has casted, right? So literally we see in chapter 3, it's organized around the rebuilding of these gates and the spaces in between the gates, the walls, right? And so it mentions those individuals, and like I said, there's a laundry list of names there. Some you'll be able to pronounce, some you won't, okay? But you should read those, and if you're like, I can't read them, listen to it. The Bible app's amazing, all right? And so we have a list of names of those that were in charge of rebuilding these gates and the people involved with the walls. And what's so incredible about it is you see people from all different walks of life coming together for this huge vision. We see, and it kicks off in chapter 3, talking about the priests. The priests are part of this. They're rebuilding the gates, the walls. We see men, women, we see professional craftsmen, and then just random people from outside of the city who come in to be a part of this. There's literally a place for everyone and a job for everyone. Now, what we also see throughout chapter 3, though, is the same things you and I experience at our work. We see some people decided not to work. We always love those coworkers, don't we? They love to claim the work. We see that some of the individuals do more of the work. And then some of them work harder, right? Some work harder than others. And then it goes down the list of the specific gates that they worked on, and I'm going to have them pull up the slide that kind of walks through the gates for you, okay? Really exciting names. We have the sheep gate, the fish gate, the old gate, valley gate, to the dung gate to the fountain gate, the horse gate, to the inspection of the gate, to the sheep gate, okay? Let's pray. There's your servant, all right? You're like, I'm never going back to that church, all right? And so what you see, though, and if you'll pull up the map for me, what you see is by how it goes down the gates, you see him work in a counterclockwise way through chapter 3 to where they're literally building and the walls. And they're building these strategic gates that needed to be built. And there's chapter 3. All right, chapter 4. Let's read verses 1 through 3. It says this. Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged. And he jeered at the Jews. And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burned ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, yes, what are they building? If a fox goes up on it, he will break down the stone wall. Okay, so we see this little group of local leaders in the surrounding region. They, once again, are not happy with what's happening. And in particular, this guy named Sanballat, who is the leader of Samaria, probably the governor there. He and his friends, as the work has begun, they start to mock the Jews. Now, as they mock and criticize the Jews that are doing this project, it's important to note that they don't do this privately, right? They do it publicly in front of everybody, including the army of Samaria. Okay, and so they're ridiculing them. They're mocking them in front of all of these people. And what they're saying here is literally, how could these feeble Jews hope to rebuild this wall and make it strong enough to actually protect it from an army? Like, who do they think they are? And he literally says, will they sacrifice? And what he's implying there by mocking the sacrifice part is he's saying it's going to take more than prayer and worship to bring these walls up. And then he says, will they finish in a day? And what he's mocking is that they have no idea about the scope or the size of this actual project. They'll never be able to finish. And then lastly, he ridicules the materials they're using, right? He says, listen, these stones are out of these rubbish heaps, these piles that have been burnt. Like what they're going to build walls out of these damaged goods? Like no way. And then his buddy Tobiah is there, and he says, with the size of the wall right now, it wouldn't take an army, it would just take a fox to jump on it, and it would crumble. Now, as we think about criticism, criticism's goal is always discouragement for you. Now, why is that? It's because the enemy believes that if you get to the place of discouragement, the next step is you're going to quit. Right? And so that's what the criticism that they're doing, that's what it's designed to do. They're doing this publicly in hopes that the workers at Jerusalem will hear about it, and they're hoping that this criticism will lead them to discouragement to where they'll just abandon the project, that they'll realize that this is not possible. Look, what are you doing, right? You're a laughing stock, and so just quit doing it. And so then we see Nehemiah's response in verse 4. This is what he says. He says, hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt and let not their sin be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Did you see his response there? Some of you are like, I loved it. I've felt that so many times in my life, and I've just wanted to say it, and I didn't know you could say that to God. Well, there you go. Welcome to the Old Testament, okay? And so Nehemiah just cries out immediately to God, and I don't want us to forget his immediate response here, because this is so important for us today. He moves right from criticism into prayer. So he immediately, so he is being criticized, right? He's being criticized and all of this, and then we see like it's reached the workers are talking about it, it's affecting them, and Nehemiah is just ticked off, and he doesn't take time to just, like go crazy about it. He immediately takes it to the Lord. Immediately. That's why he's so mad. Right? He hasn't like cooled off. He's like, I'll just get myself calm, cool, collected. Okay, fold the hands, get on my knees, and God, Almighty God, Like, no, he is raw. He's real before God. He's like, wipe them out. I pray that you do that while they're enslaved. He is just going at it, right? Like he's like, God, these people, I can't take this anymore. And what he's doing is he immediately took all of his thoughts, his feelings and emotions, and he brought them to the only one who could do anything about it. And then he went back to work. See, here's what we see here. By responding in this way to the criticism, Nehemiah avoided a common mistake so many of us make when we deal with criticism. And you will deal with criticism. Like if you're younger in this room, you will deal with criticism. But a common mistake that we make that he avoided is he didn't allow his enemies or the criticism to become the focus of his attention. Okay, see, our natural response to criticism when you're criticized is to what? You want to defend yourself, right? You want to defend yourself. Specifically, you want to defend yourself to those people who are saying these things against you, right? So you want to respond to them. And the other thing that happens that we normally do with criticism is not only are we caught up in how do we defend our honor and attack them back, but we also allow it to what? Consume our minds, right? Consume our minds, our hearts, to where we put our head on our pillow. It's all we can think about. We're driving in our car alone. It's all we can think about. And so this defending myself, my honor, and that I become consumed by that thought, this reality that I'm under attack. And it hurts even more when it's what? When it's your vision under attack. And so I think for most of us, if not all of us, when we deal with criticism, especially when it comes to something that's really important to us, we're tempted to go back and forth with these critics or those that are passing along the criticism, right? And consequently, here's what happens. We waste time, energy, thought, emotions trying to answer questions for people who aren't really interested in answers. Like, have you ever even considered that or realized that? I had this, and I'm just as guilty of this. I had this moment with these people, and we're having this interaction, and I go into this defend myself, right? And so I defend myself, and at the end of defending myself, I am really proud of myself. Have you ever been there? Where you just go, whoa, they did not see that coming. I am so right, and they are clearly wrong, and they know it. And you know what they said to me? I'll never forget this. They said, "You're right. We don't care." And I was like, I didn't even know what to do with that. I go, huh? You're right, but we don't really care. We're still going to do this. And I just went, and what I realized there, and what that has, how I've carried that in my life, is to realize that criticism, typically non-constructive, is usually being thrown at you from people who don't care about the truth. And so you just need to know that. But the problem is, without realizing it, what happens for us? Our focus begins to shift, right? And our focus begins to shift. Instead of being vision-centered, we become critic-centered. And what I love about Nehemiah here is Nehemiah was able to remain vision-centered in spite of the criticism. And you guys, criticism is so tough because criticism hits our emotions, doesn't it? Right? It hits our emotions. It's not just this intellectual disagreement. Criticism is you're attacking me and I feel it in a very deep way. And we're most emotional about what we're most passionate about, right? If anyone challenges your spouse, your family, your kids, how's your response? It's different, isn't it? Isn't it different? Why? Because you're so passionate about them. right? If you've got a vision, a burden that you are passionate about, and someone attacks you and your motives and your heart for it, man, you feel that and it hurts and it's a deep emotion. But the reality is, what are you gonna do with that emotion, right? The emotion has to go somewhere. So I either get caught up in how do I literally reflect back my emotions onto these people, or do I make the choice of I'm just gonna hold it inside, because that really works well for your mental health, right? I'm just gonna hold on to it and it's gonna go away. Or third, we're just like, I am just gonna unleash on all of these people that have nothing to do with the situation, right? Hey, we were a friend at one point, I need to get this off my chest, right? And we just dump, right? And it could be a friend, it could be a spouse, it could be all kinds of people, right? And they're just innocent bystanders and but man, you're all over it, right? And so what do we do with these emotions that we have? That's a very real thing that Nehemiah had to go with as well. The only healthy and profitable thing we can do with those emotions is to pour them out to God. And once again, I'm not saying that you get it all wrapped up nice and neatly and put a bow on that prayer. I'm saying you immediately have to go to God with all of that emotion, with all of that hurt, with all of that pain, as someone has just hit on some insecurities that you have, and you don't know what to do with it. Guys, you're not equipped to deal with it, right? Like if you look at Nehemiah's qualifications, he's ill-equipped to handle all of these local governors against him, isn't he? And so we have to pour our hearts out to God. And he's honored when we take our deepest frustrations and our hurts to him. Do you know that? He's honored by that. And I look and I go, man, this is all throughout Scripture. This is modeled for us, right? In Psalm 5, 9, and 10, David's always the best at this. And it says, this is what he spews out to God. He says, for there is no truth in their mouth. Their inmost self is destruction. Their throat is an open grave. You ever said that to someone? No, don't. They flatter with their tongue. Make them bear their guilt, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Because of the abundance of their transgressions, cast them out, for they have rebelled against you. This is David like praying to God, right? My prayers are a little different, I feel like. But here's what prayer does. Prayer puts criticism in its proper context. And the criticism, as a result of that, it loses its power. See, because what happens is prayer enables you to evaluate criticism from God's perspective. Now, when you see something from God's perspective, what does that do? It puts you in the right perspective to be able to respond appropriately to the critics that you're going to have. See, and I know this just gets worse and worse, but here it is. What's going to be really, really challenging about this, for some of you, is when the criticism is valid. When the criticism about you is actually true. That is when you really feel it. Is when people are leveling these accusations, these things against you, or they're just pointing out flaws. They're pointing out failures in your past that point to why you can't accomplish or do this. They're pointing out all the shortcomings, all the mistakes that you have made. And what hurts more than any of the other, at least for me, criticisms, is when you listen to it, you hear it, and you go, yeah, they're right. They're right. Like I look at the criticism that the Jews here are taking from this Sanballat guy and these other governors, and I look at it and I go, yeah, you know what? Yeah, they're kind of right. Like this is not this incredible construction crew that pulls up. Like this is a struggle of a group. They're not skilled builders. They're not the most committed people. Clearly, it's been over 100 years. The walls still aren't built. Okay, and they're gonna walk off the job at some point that we'll read, but there's certain section that it's in such a mess, it's in such disarray that they can't even like fix certain things. So I look at this criticism and I go, man, like this is tough because he's receiving things that, to be honest, they're true. They're true. But here's the thing they weren't factoring when they're leveling these criticisms against them. And the criticisms that are going to be leveled against you, this is what the people, they don't see. They don't take God into consideration. And guys, for some of you, chances are you're going to experience some criticism and it's going to be valid and it's going to be true. And you're going to sit there and go, man, I have no defense for that because, to be honest, it is the truth. But will you, like Nehemiah, still follow through with what you know to do? Will you do what you can do and trust God to do what only he can do? And for Nehemiah, what did it mean? I'm going back to work. And so he goes back to work with the people. And then we see verse 7, it says, but when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem was going forward and that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. In Judah, it was said, the strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves, we will not be able to rebuild the wall. And our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. At that time, the Jews who lived near them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. So in the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, in open places, I stationed the people by their clans and with their swords, their spears and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we all returned to the wall, each to his own work. I know we read a lot there. But man, this is big. So the ongoing work, it only makes the enemy even more upset. And so now they link arms with the local governing authorities that surround Jerusalem. We've got the west, we've got the east, we've got the south, we've got the north, all covered with these armies. And we're all going to, in their minds, surprise attack Jerusalem from all sides. And what does Nehemiah immediately do once again? Man, he goes to the Lord. As soon as he hears about this, he immediately goes to the Lord, and then he positions the guards in different spots, right? Notice this, and this is a common theme. He tweaks the plan. He's willing to adapt and change the plan, but not the vision. So soon, this word spreads into Jerusalem that all their neighbors are preparing for war against them. And here's what's so tough about this too. It's not just they're hearing the rumors now, but this is also coming from their own countrymen. Their own people now are coming in and they're saying, you got to stop. Stop rebuilding the walls. Everybody is circling around us. They're going to attack us. They're going to take us out because you guys are building the walls. Stop. And some of these are family members who are back at their houses and they're reporting into the city. They're coming in and they're like, you got to come home. You got to protect us. We're all isolated out there. Come back. You have to stop this. This isn't going to go well. And so these builders, they're experiencing this tension. And not only now are they afraid, are they discouraged, but to make matters worse, the obstacles to rebuilding the wall are starting to look insurmountable. Like the rubbish is more rubbish than they thought. And they're tired. They're tired of building. The thrill of the new project had worn off. It was more than they could handle, and their families were at risk. And this combination of fear and discouragement pushes them over to the edge, and they stop working. And I think we can all identify with that, can't we? There's probably been a moment in your life where you just said, this is just too much. This is too much. Like that was tough. That was tougher. This is enough. It's enough. So we see the group of people he's leading. They're all in this place. And then Nehemiah responds again. He identifies even more vulnerable locations and he places armed guards there. And then he does something really strategic. He groups the defenders of these areas with their own families. In other words, what he's doing is he's making sure that those who are defending are surrounded by the people they care the most about who are worth defending. So he strategically places them, and we know from how they built and constructed the walls, many of the people, as they were building the walls, they were doing that next to the place they lived. So they're already passionate about protecting this area, about protecting what's right there and behind them. And so he places these people strategically there. And one of the things that is so important for us, I talked about how God may call us to change the plan in order to still fulfill the vision. We have to be willing to do that. Okay, like two things typically happen when it comes to fulfilling, right, like a vision. And one of the things that can happen when we are trying to fulfill this vision that God has given us is, one, we say, this is the plan, and I'm not gonna move it off from this plan, right? This is it. And so I'm not going to deviate at all from the plan. And so we just hold this plan, and God may shift the plan in order to fulfill the vision. And so we have to be flexible with that. We have to be willing. We have to be adaptable to the reality that he may want to shift the vision, right? But the other thing about this is you actually need to make a plan. Right? For some of you right now in your life that you have identified, God has shown you in your life that there are some weak points in your life. There's some weak spaces that you have mentally, emotionally, physically, temptations, and he's pointed those out. And he didn't point them out to just say, hey, there they are. Good luck with that. No, he pointed them out so you would be able to identify the vulnerable spaces in your heart and in your life. And so then you would pay attention and what? Fortify those spaces. Make some changes in order to guard and protect your heart. And so we see him do that. And then lastly, when you think about the doubts and the fears that you're going to deal with, you have to be able to take your eyes off of what you can't fix and reflect on God's faithfulness. There is going to be a point in time, you guys, like Nehemiah couldn't control what those people were going to do, right? He couldn't control what they were going to say. He couldn't control the response of the people he's leading. And yet what he does here and what he pushes the people to do is remarkable leadership, you guys, is he literally challenges them to take their eyes off of the fear, off of what they couldn't fix on their own, and then to do what? To reflect on God's faithfulness. To reflect on God's faithfulness. See, Nehemiah, he didn't just wait for this to figure itself out. What does he do? Nehemiah actually gathers all the people together. He gathers them together and he tells them, I want you to remember the faithfulness of God in your life. I want you to remember that. Right? That's the challenge. And so just as he challenged them to remember the faithfulness of God in their life, when we're faced with similar opposition, we have to step back from that because all our eyes are going to be fixated is on what? The criticism, the fear, the unanswered questions. God, how are you going to do this, right? And we have to step back, remove ourselves from the emotion in that, and just look back at the faithfulness of God on your behalf. You will see all throughout your life moments in time where God supernaturally intervened. Whether it was protection, like some of you have been in car wrecks and you're just like, that's crazy, I can't believe I didn't die. That's just remarkable, I don't even know how that happened. And God's like, seriously? Right? Like some of you have had a friend who came into your life at just the right time. I mean, this person saved your life. I had one of those. And I cannot look at that and just go, oh man, that was so coincidental. No, there's so many moments where God intervened to reveal his faithfulness, that he's not gonna let you go. He's not gonna let you down. He's not gonna abandon the vision that he has for you. I love how Paul tells Timothy, this young pastor in 2 Timothy 2:8, Paul tells him, remember Jesus Christ. Just remember Jesus Christ, risen from the dead, the offspring of David, as preached in my gospel. Remember that. And we can put this together, at this point in time, remember, the workers have stopped working. They've walked off the job. They've just said enough is enough. And Nehemiah knew he had to get their eyes off of the opposition and back onto why they decided to rebuild the wall in the first place. And he says, fight for your people. And they go back to work. Now, Sanballat and his buddies, they were counting on the advantage of a surprise attack, but no, that's no longer an option. And we see that Nehemiah has effectively called their bluff, and they end up backing away. And then Nehemiah, once again, showing that it's God's vision, God's plan, he revises his plan again for moving forward. And guys, one of the things that this points to is we see in Psalm 33, 10 and 11, look what it says. It says, the Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Okay, so there's going to be opposition, there's going to be people against you, and the Lord brings that kind of counsel, the counsel against his will, he brings it to nothing. He's going to frustrate those plans. He says, but the counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. And so you just see his hand, his movement in this situation. And so then we see Nehemiah's response again. In verse 16, this is what he says, and we'll finish these verses. Says, from that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half held the spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building on the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held his weapon with the other. And each of the builders had his sword strapped at his side while he built. The man who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And I said to the nobles and to the officials and to the rest of the people, the work is great and widely spread, and we are separated on the wall, far from one another. In the place where you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we labored at the work, and half of them held the spears from the break of dawn until the stars came out. I also said to the people at that time, let every man and his servant pass the night within Jerusalem, that they may be a guard for us by night and may labor by day. So neither I, nor my brothers, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me, none of us took off our clothes. Each kept his weapon at his right hand. Or if you're a lefty like me, your left hand. Now, Nehemiah knew that he couldn't interrupt the work for every new rumor, right? For every new accusation, for every new criticism. And so he once again, he tweaks the overall plan here, and he sets up this plan of defense is what we see. So half of the men worked on the wall. The other half now stood guard. He saw to it that those people carrying materials, they were also carrying a weapon. and the workers on the wall, they carried swords. And so this way the work would go uninterrupted, and the workers would be ready at all times. And then he positioned a man with a trumpet right next to him so that he could give the alarm at any point in time if there was an attack. And so he's got these people prepared to fight. They're ready to go. And then I love his next line. What is his next line? Remember this, people. Our God will fight for us. They're prepared. They're ready. He's repositioned them. He's changed the schedule. And he says, but remember, our God will fight for us. You guys, here's what I want to encourage you with. Even if what you fear happens in your life, towards the vision, the burden, the calling on your life, God will fight on your behalf. We see Nehemiah also instituted this second shift, and he required the workers from other towns to stay in Jerusalem at night, help guard the city. And he not only organized the workers and guards and encouraged them to trust in the Lord, but here's the other thing about Nehemiah that we're just going to see over and over again, is he set an example by how he served. He led through how we served. Did you catch this? You guys, he stayed on the job. He was alert at all times. I mean, to the point where we could question his personal hygiene. I mean, seriously, right? Like he literally says, for me, cleaning my face and all that, I kept my clothes on, right? Because I was always alert, I was always prepared, I always had my weapon in hand, and he literally leads through how he serves, how he responds. He didn't separate himself from the issue. He didn't say, hey, good luck, you got this, I'm gonna be up there in that tower, hanging out, okay? No, he's at the forefront of this. He's in this with them. And so here's what I wanna challenge us with today. As you face the inevitable criticism that comes with a God-given vision, first and foremost, take that criticism to God. You will receive it, it will come, and it will surprise you. But take it to God. Make that commitment. Before anything else, go to God with it. And don't clean yourself up before you go to him with it. Bring all of it. And then after that, take time to remember the faithfulness of God in your life. Think back to the time when he first birthed that vision in your heart. Reflect on the ways that he's intervened. Maybe early in the process, he intervened in your life. Reread those portions of scripture that spoke to you, that helped bring clarity, that picked you back up when you were struggling. Fortify those areas in your life that are weak right now that you can see and you can identify. And listen, you guys, if you need to make adjustments or changes to the plan along the way, don't be afraid to do so. That doesn't mean God's abandoning the vision for your life. And it will be a challenge. It will be a fight to finish well. But always know that even if your worst fear happens, God will fight for you. He will fight on your behalf. And so you do what you know to do, and you entrust God to do what only he can do. Amen? Let's pray. God.